Hey everyone, Noah Zerby here. Welcome back. In our last video, we looked at the concept of polarity in international relations. In this video, we're going to look at the concept of hegemonic stability theory, which deals with the international system under conditions of unipolarity. Remember that a unipolar system is an international system in which there is one dominant actor, and we'll often refer to that actor as a hegemon. Now, hegemonic stability theory really deals with the implications of a unipolar system. Remember that under such a system, there is a single dominant actor or state that's capable of enforcing its will on other actors in the international system. Now, to be a hegemon, a state generally must have the capability to enforce the rules of the international system on the other actors. It needs to have the willingness to do that, to enforce those rules. And it needs to have a commitment to a system which is at least perceived as being mutually beneficial to the other major states in that system. Such dominant states generally have a large and growing economy, they dominate the leading technological and economic sectors of the world, and they have political power backed up by military power that can be projected internationally. Historically, there are several examples of such hegemons. We can think of Britain during the Industrial Revolution from roughly 1815 to 1915, or we can think of the United States in the post-World War II era from 1945 to the early 1970s as examples. Now, hegemonic stability theory posits that during these periods, the dominant power, or the hegemon, can develop and enforce rules in the international system that facilitate greater stability and address collective goods problems. The hegemon might seek to induce or incentivize or coerce or threaten other states to behave in particular ways to maintain that system. The post-World War II system, enforced by the United States, for example, attempted to reproduce capitalism and democracy, and thus promoted human rights and capitalism as the dominant international norms. Other states may try to enjoy the benefits of these institutions, even while seeking to avoid paying the costs of maintaining them. Thus, the hegemon must be willing to bear a disproportionate share of the costs of maintaining such international institutions. The United States during this period remained committed to free trade, even while other countries imposed trade barriers, because if the United States implemented such barriers, the system would collapse. Over time, new powers may rise and begin to articulate alternative visions for an international order. New technologies may be developed that shift the balance of power away from the hegemon. When that happens, the system becomes unstable and the dominant hegemon wanes. But at its heart, hegemonic stability theory attempts to explain why international regimes tend to develop more fully when the international system is dominated by a single power. Now, different theoretical approaches understand the role and motivations of hegemons differently. Liberals tend to emphasize the ability of the hegemon to supply collective goods and overcome the free rider dilemma. As previously noted, the willingness of the hegemon to accept some free riding by others in exchange for their general cooperation makes the provision of collective goods possible. Mercantilists, now remember we can think of them as sort of economic realists, or realism applied to the economy, emphasize the extent to which hegemons can provide security to other countries in exchange for their cooperation. They tend to emphasize the benefits and surpluses the hegemon gains as a result of their central position in the global economy. And finally, Marxists and other critical IR scholars emphasize the imperial nature of the hegemon's ambitions. Hegemons are able to impose their rules and their ideals on other states in the international system, and do so in order to exploit states in the periphery and expand their own wealth and position. Another great example of hegemonic stability theory in action might include Saudi Arabia's role in OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. OPEC is basically a cartel, a group of exporting countries that dominate global oil production and are thus able to coordinate production to influence global prices. OPEC currently has 14 members, and their leading members of OPEC are shown here in green. It accounts for almost half of total global oil production and over 80% of proven global oil reserves. Now, OPEC has an interest in maintaining stable and relatively high oil prices, while the rest of the world would largely prefer lower oil prices. So OPEC tries to limit oil production among its members to keep global oil prices high. The problem, of course, is that while all OPEC members would prefer higher oil prices, they would also like to increase their own exports. But if every OPEC member increases their exports more than their quota, oil prices would fall and the cartel would lose both power and income. Some oil exporting countries, most notably historically at least Saudi Arabia, have also been concerned that ongoing high oil prices could also incentivize the development of alternative energies. As a result, they prefer to keep oil prices just high enough to maintain good levels of profitability, while also keeping prices low enough to make alternative energy sources less attractive. So where does hegemonic stability theory play in here? Because of the tendency of OPEC members to exceed their target quotas, overproducing oil and thereby driving down global oil prices, Saudi Arabia, as the leading producer within OPEC, has frequently underproduced its own quota. It uses its dominant position to sacrifice for the group, bearing a disproportionate share of the costs of the cartel in order to keep the regime functional and in place. This is a good example of a hegemon playing that role of hegemon within the context of hegemonic stability theory. So that concludes our consideration of hegemonic stability theory. I hope you found it useful. Thanks for watching and see you again soon. Bye.